So what was your other question was about their them
If it's
hurting their
technique or
voices?
if it's overworking their voices. That's fascinating, by the way. The vocal fingerprint is your recognizable. I'm liking you're using some good tones, not tones, phrases. I'm gonna start taking notes,
I
man.
know. If I find these like written down on these sunset pictures and stuff, like for those inspo quotes.
Yeah, you'll know where
Find
they
your
came
vocal
from.
fingerprint.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be hunting people down. Anyway, so I've got several theories on stuff like this. the the whole idea of like vocal fatigue is a very real thing. So I remember listening to Miley Cyrus. She was talking in a podcast, and she said, I think it was Joe Rogan, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
listen to Joe Rogan, so it must have been a clip that I seen.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's not important. Um, and she said something like the gig was one part of the the night. After that, she was so like keyed up, and she was just like living off that energy of being on the stage that she stayed up all night. She smoked, she drank, she took drugs, and she like hammered her voice, didn't give herself rest. So not resting is one thing that I would say is hugely important to not avoid. You need to get your rest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other thing is the more that music is evolving, the more people are pushing their voices into these extreme parts of their range. You know, every song now is like, where's the high note? We want the high note. We want the big belty bit. And for you to create, say 10 songs that are like that, and then you have to go and sing them night
Mm-hmm.
after night after
Yeah.
night, and you don't take steps to mitigate, like modulating the key down so that it's a more comfortable place. Like Harry Styles, he does that, modulates all his keys down,
Yeah.
um, which is
I've
a
been
good
noticing that.
choice.
Yeah, like it's fascinating though, like because like it's so interesting how we just as society have like trained our ears to want to hear a certain thing. Like we have to do it's the studio version versus the live version. It's like, well, why
Yeah,
don't we just have one version? Like, why do we have to make it so like, why
exactly.
does it like for example like, and I'm not bad. This is not bashing. It's just like it's just become the industry standard because it's what the consumer has become used to. You know what I mean? It's like, I notice it a lot. Like Olivia Rodrigo's driver's license originally in the key of B flat, but
Mm.
whenever she plays it live, it's in the key of A. You know what I mean? So it's just interesting to see. You see that a lot of artists do that.
Yeah, and it's because that's where you get the heightened emotion from. Like when your voice gets to that breaking point in your range, you'll get
Mm,
some form of like reaction, whether
sure,
that's a little bit of texture, whether that's like it sounds pained
that's
because it
interesting.
probably is. Um,
Mm,
but when you're in a studio, you'll know yourself. You've got take after take after take after take. You
mm-hmm.
can keep taking a run at it and go, I'm not hitting that note. I'm taking an hour. We'll come back to it. Um, whereas live, you've got one chance, and
Mm-hmm.
and the way that it kind of falls now is that people they do one bad performance and then people are like they're a bad singer, and you're like it's ridiculous, and then they get all upset because people lip sync, and I'm like, what do you expect?
Yeah.
Like
I like now when I pointed out in a lot of the videos that I do when you hear a funky note come through,
I love it.
because I'm like, oh wow, they're actually not lip syncing because when you can tell there's, I mean, from a production standpoint, but also from a pitch standpoint, if you don't hear a single slightly flat or sharp note, it's like it's 100% not live. There's no way that a singer's doing all the movements that they're doing, first of all, and then also all the nerves and everything for it to be so
Yeah,
perfect. There's no way, and like it's easier. It's so much easier.
yeah,
There's nothing that can go wrong. You know what I mean? Like whereas opposed to like if there's so many things that can go wrong. I just did a video recently actually with it was with the Brit Awards, and it was the weekend, and it would do the Save Your Tears, and he was saying, like I was saying, commenting in the video, it's like I always find it. This is a slight tangent, but I always find it
I love a tangent.
slightly interesting when like, there's so much production in that song, Save Your Tears, and you obviously have his singing, but then they have one random keyboardist on the stage. It's like there's no drummer, that everything is played to tracks except for the keyboard player. I'm like, why? Like you're adding such an element of things that can go so wrong now, because like I would be like, in all honesty, I was like, I hope he's not actually playing, because like
Yeah, a prop.
it seems foolish that like everything's played the tracks, everything's perfectly timed, and then you have this one random guy that can hit the wrong note and like screw up the song. Like it makes no sense. So, but no, it is interesting. Like I actually appreciate when you hear a funky note because that means that the rest of the song is actually live. And when they do the good parts, you're like, wow, that's actually really them.
I mean, one of my favorite genres of music is Motown, like hands down. I love listening to Motown music. And back in the day, they used to take, and this is almost the opposite to how it is now. They would take the song and they'd learn it in a comfortable key, and then when they recorded it, they'd put the key up. So that all of these singers, they're like really straining. If you go and listen to some of the older stuff, you will hear them cracking all over the place. You'll hear notes not being completely hit. You'll hear them dissipating into this breathless sound. And it's so authentic to me. And I feel like nowadays, when everything's like Melodyne to within an inch of its life, you're like, and I don't know about you, but from people that listen to music and listen to singers a lot, it is noticeable.
Sure, 100%.
It's becoming the point where people are almost like not saying that they think it's been melodyned, and you can melodyne or you can auto tune, I suppose you would say, or lightly tune stuff as it's coming out, like live. You can take feeds from a live performance and then edit them in post production and then re-upload it with this fresh sound on top of it. And I don't think that it's spoken about kind of enough. To me, if I had no limits and no barriers, that you're emperor of the music world, I would have a caveat that said if you're going to put any effects on, you need to have it listed. Like you need to have it listed so that young singers, have to come and it's getting to the point where people are going, oh, I'm never going to sound like that, and you're like, like here's a top more. And it's like the secret is they don't even sound like that, you know.
It drives me insane. It's like you can't call it a live performance when it's not a live performance, when it's not live vocal, for example. Like, and that's something I try to be very conscious of on my music. It's like if I'm editing my vocals and pitching them up, it's not live anymore, you know what I mean? Like, and I can't call it. So like, but like that's like an industry standard. Like that's almost every musician. When you see like those live like recordings after the fact, like somebody probably went in, even from like the there was a comment coming in here. Said, wait, are you guys live right now?
Yeah, we are. So we just did a song.
That's funny. That's funny. But it's true, man, and that drives me insane because like, but everything from the vocals to the guitar part to the drumming part, like they're so often they'll be like, oh, the drummer was out of time here. Let's just go re-record the drums. You know what I mean? It's like it's just, it creates like this false expectation, like you said, like I'll never sound like that, and it's like, yeah, that's something. That's why I bring it up a lot, because it's like it's not fair to a young singer, that comparison, 100%.
Well, then you have just put yourself forward as the USA ambassador for my emperorship.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
But yeah, I long for a time where we get back to the point of listening to rawer sounding voices, and like you said, if you put out something completely raw, people would go, that sounds weird, and you're like, it's because you're listening to a real voice. Like, it's not been compressed, it's not been mixed, it's not been, no reverb.
Oh, you're talking real raw.
Oh, like, I mean, obviously I would I love reverb, I love effects, I love all this stuff, but I think once we start getting into like changing the actual frequencies and stuff of a voice, there's a thing called Squealo. Have you heard of Squealo?
I don't know. Elaborate, maybe.
So Squealo is the singer's formant. It's also called AES, aryepiglottic sphincter, or oral twang. Is really a catch-all term for it. Now, it is a way of singing. I'm going to do it away from the microphone because it's really annoying, but it sounds like this. Right? Mm-hmm. So your epiglottis makes a really twangy sound, makes a little chamber above your folds and makes the sound a lot more pointed. And then what happens is your vocal comes out at a frequency between 2 and 4 kilohertz, which is the resonant frequency of your ear canal. So even though you're not putting more effort into the sound, it sounds louder because your ear is excited by that frequency.
Oh, we're talking tech, man. I love this. Yeah.
So Squealo is that thing applied in opera music and in opera. So even an entire orchestra all together playing, they don't hit that resonant frequency in the ear canal. They sit lower, I think. Yeah, lower. So that is why back in the day, when you had an opera singer and they had a 100-piece orchestra behind them with loads of instruments, they
Mm-hmm.
could still be heard
Mm-hmm.
because they were cutting through that frequency with a frequency that is
Mm-hmm.
more in tune to a human ear.
Yeah.
Now, when we get into things like editing in the studio and stuff, all I would need to do is take a band of frequencies that aren't in there, and you can almost pitch things up to make them that frequency. You can kind
Mm-hmm.
of jar things into places where they wouldn't naturally go, and stuff like that doesn't get picked up in the wider world because who
Mm-hmm.
cares? But to me, I'm like, that sound shouldn't be that pointed. There's obviously something
Interesting.
that's going on with it, and that's why when I listen to stuff, I get a lot of heat sometimes on my channel because I'm like, this isn't live, I don't think, or this has been
Yeah.
done in post-production, and people are like, no, that's their live voice 100%, how dare you go.
It's so funny, man. It's like,
And I'm like,
exactly. Meanwhile, like, you probably know more than the average viewer.
yeah,
You're
I'm talking
just-
about frequencies and everything. They're like, no, you're stupid. I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
Good story. But
No,
I mean,
it's fascinating, man.
the other thing is that I don't feel any kind of like, I don't get frustrated with comments like that, because this is the way that music has gone, that we're almost like so conditioned to hearing a voice that's been produced
Yeah.
that anything out of that space is deemed bizarre.
Yeah, and then you get even to like the super overproduction, like the noticeable, like, which I particularly don't mind, like, in the sense of, like, it's not saying it's wrong. I'm like wrong, like morally wrong versus like tonally enjoyment. Like, I kind of like the whole Machine Gun Kelly kind of like it's just like there's no vibrato. It's super straight, like super, like every single note is perfectly on pitch. It kind of it's interesting to hear. Because it's like, it's the extreme version without it being actually auto-tuned like T-Pain.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
I mean,
So
but then
it's interesting.
the whole, I think every single vocal style is valid, and like
Sure.
the even heavily auto-tuned stuff like T-Pain, and when Cher had that like
Mm-hmm.
90s moment and it was all blah, 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 and it sounds really kind of wobbly and metallic and slippy.
Mm-hmm.
It still has its place, and it's still a really good feature to use.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing that I don't suppose it bothers me, but I often wonder how a producer feels when they have spent hours, weeks, or whatever creating this perfect like vocal, and then everyone goes, "They're so good live, they don't need anyone," and they're just in the background going, "At least I get paid a lot for this."
Wow, interesting perspective, because
You
he's
know?
doing all the work.
Well, you have to have a good voice to start with,
Interesting.
so that's
Sure.
one
That's
thing.
interesting. I've never thought about that, man.
But do we really revere producers in the way that we revere singers? Like, is there I mean, imagine
wow.
in the music world, there's like, you have to go to this producer. He will make your voice sound amazing, but just don't ever tell anyone he exists.
Wow.
You know, there's like,
That's
there's
interesting, man.
I try and get as granular as possible with vocals, and I love everything to do with the voice. Like, but I feel like if we shy away from areas, then we're not serving anyone, you know?
I love that, man. That's you hit on such a great point there. All that stuff is such great points.